We're singing. We're singing. Time to talk. Beauty and the Bitch.
Hello, Morgie. I said, hello, Morgie. Well, my friends, it has finally happened. Someone turned Morgan in for her horrible wigs, and now she is experiencing what life in jail is like. That's right, Morgan is in jail. And she's bald, because they took her wigs when they checked her into jail. So, while Morgan makes probably very good friends with her cellmates, I'm sure extremely good friends with her cellmates, I am kind of ironically left to deal with the Testaments. Well, I shouldn't say deal with, as if I'm not excited to talk about it, because I am, but I mean, obviously, the Testaments, Margaret Atwood's book, which came out just this year and is the long-awaited sequel to The Handmaid's Tale, is really, I mean, for the first episode ever, just to feature a male voice of our podcast, it's kind of ironic that that episode is about the very female-centric The Testaments. But just like Morgan likes gay boys, I love women, so I guess it's fine. No, but seriously about Morgan, she is caught in a submarine at the bottom of the sea. So, if you like to go snorkeling, and you're willing to go look for her, good luck with that. Welcome back to another episode of Beauty and the Bitch. I'm the beauty, it's the facts, no one's here to say it's not true, and therefore it is true, because words matter. Today, I'm Mick, and today we are talking about a book that I ordered off of Amazon, and honestly devoured in like a day and a half. Which, I mean, I'm a fast reader when I'm into what I'm reading, but it's been a long time, y'all, since I have read something this quickly. As I mentioned in my ridiculous intro, we're talking about the Testaments. Now, if you haven't heard about it, you must not be plugged into like literary circles, because the Testaments is a pretty big deal. We've done an episode on The Handmaid's Tale. I have no idea when. I think it was in the first year. And it was mostly, well, it was about the first season of the Hulu show plus the book. Because the first season of the Hulu show did cover the book. But the Testaments is something that I'm super excited to talk about. And like I was saying, fans of The Handmaid's Tale, which came out in 1984, another famous dystopia, 1984, fans of The Handmaid's Tale have been waiting, begging for a sequel. Or have they? Actually, fans of The Handmaid's Tale are in two very distinct camps about the need for a sequel. I'm not exactly sure which camp I fall into. Maybe at the end of the episode, I'll decide exactly where I fall. But I will say this. Not everyone thought there needed to be a sequel, but the people who were eager for a sequel were over-eager. They were extremely eager. So I'm sure those people are very pleased. So what is the Testaments about? Well, this is from the front leaf. I'm just going to read the front leaf because here's the thing. This is a spoiler-free episode. I'm not going to give away what happens in the Testaments because this book did just come out. And so it would be completely unfair to spoil it. And so just to make sure, I'm just going to read what Margaret Atwood and her, publisher and people decide was okay to say. Okay, 15 years after the events of The Handmaid's Tale, the theocratic regime of the Republic of Gilead maintains its grip on power, but there are signs it is beginning to rot from within. At this crucial moment, the lives of three radically different women converge, with potentially explosive results. Two have grown up on opposite sides of the border, one in Gilead as the privileged daughter of an important commander, and one in Canada, where she marches in anti-Gilead protests and watches news of its horrors on TV. The testimonies of these two young women, part of the first generation to come of age in the new order, are braided with a third voice, that of one of the regime's enforcers, a woman who wields power through... She never yields power. Never. Wields power through the ruthless accumulation and deployment of secrets. Long buried secrets are what finally bring these three together, forcing each of them to come to terms with who she is and how far she will go for what she believes. As Atwood unfolds the stories of the women of the women of the Testaments, she opens up our view of the innermost workings of Gilead in a triumphant blend of riveting suspense, blah blah blah. Okay, so let me tell you this. My favorite part about this book was exactly what I just read, the unraveling. Where is it? She opens up our view of the innermost workings of Gilead. Because here's the thing about The Handmaid's Tale, which is, I think, I mean, it's undeniably a classic and a masterpiece. And I mean, not just the popularity of the Hulu show proves that, but the enduring popularity of the book. I mean, 1984 was a long time away, honey. That was a solid 20 years before I was born. 20 years. It's less fun to make those kind of jokes without Morgan here to be like, you're old as shit. Well, whatever. But anyway, so The Handmaid's Tale, yes, it was a masterpiece. It is a masterpiece. But part of the beauty, part of the magic of The Handmaid's Tale is the fact that we don't get a lot of information. Offred is a woman who has essentially no power, even over herself, and she's not in a position to explain to us how this regime could exist and what goes on behind the scenes. She has no idea. She's got enough going on in front of the scene. She's got enough going on in the commander's bedroom to last a lifetime. I mean, that's enough trauma to really just, I mean, that's enough to focus on, right? And then, you know, possible escape and stuff like that. So that's something I was always very curious about, is like, how the fuck, who rose up? We know, I think, from The Handmaid's Tale that there is a violent uprising. Or maybe we learned that in the Hulu show, actually. I'm sorry, things are kind of blinging together for me as far as that goes. But I just remember that, I mean, even the end of The Handmaid's Tale, it ends on a question mark. We don't know what happens, really, to Offred. So this book, The Testaments, is very, very different from that. I mean, it's essentially full of answered questions. It's full of details. And I don't know, where The Handmaid's Tale is packed with ambiguity, The Testaments is all about unambiguous detail. So my question about that is, and this is a question to you, but also I guess a question to myself, because I haven't really decided what I think, does the sequel lessen the power of the original? I don't know, I think maybe, because, we find out what happens to many of the characters we meet in The Handmaid's Tale, and I don't know that I like that. It's kind of like The Pit and the Pendulum by what's his name? He drank himself to death. They found him in a gutter. He's American. Annabelle Lee. What the fuck is his name? God, and see, I don't have Morgan here to help me when I forget the most obvious things. Let me look up Annabelle Lee. No. Edgar Allan Poe. Edgar Allan Poe, The Pit and the Pendulum, right? If you've read that short story. It's about a man who, I guess it's during the, something to do with the Catholic Church. The Inquisition. He's captured in the Inquisition. And there's like this, and he's in this room where there's a pit, like a well, you expect the girl from The Ring to crawl out of. And there's a pendulum, which is, obviously, you know what a pendulum is, but it's got like a really sharp blade at the end of it. And he has to kind of pick between the pit and the pendulum because the blade's swinging around the room. And there's a lot of crazy shit that happens in that short story. I mean, at one point, the walls get hot. They start moving in on him. I think there are rats in the room. And the Inquisitors or whoever, they stand at the top of the walls and look down on him at certain points and constantly just falling asleep or getting knocked out. And it's a very scary short story, I think. But one of the scariest parts of it is that we never find out what exactly is at the bottom of the pit. Now, at one point, the narrator, who is unreliable, sees what's at the bottom and it horrifies him. But because we never see it, it isn't just a tangle of bones or, you know, heads on a stake or, you know, whatever it may be. We get to pick for ourselves what horrified him. I like ambiguity in literature and in art. I think all great art is ambiguous to a certain extent. Can I back that up? Do I believe that? I think I believe that. I'm pretty sure I do. So that begs the question. Because there is essentially no ambiguity in the Testaments, am I saying it's not art? Am I saying it's not great art? No. I am saying I will go out on a limb here and say I think The Handmaid's Tale is better than the Testaments, but I like the Testaments a lot. I mean, it's a page turner. It is very suspenseful. A lot of people, I read stuff online where people were like, well, I guessed all of the twists and turns, and don't worry, I won't tell you neither twist nor turn. But I just don't read that way often. I mean, it's very rare that I'm like, oh, I knew that was coming, because I like to give myself over to the story. And I try not to think too far ahead. I just focus on the words in front of my face, you know? So that wasn't necessarily a problem for me. Now, do I believe those people when they say they guess the twists and the turns? Yes, because in retrospect, yes. There is one big twist that I just said I never do this, but I did kind of guess it. It's kind of obvious. I mean, there aren't that many characters in this story, so it's easy to make connections between characters, and that's all I'll say about that. So, to return to the question, does the sequel lessen the power of the original? Not if you don't read it. I mean, yeah, I think kind of it does, honestly, because it takes away the ambiguity. But I do think, though, that these are two very different works. Yes, The Testaments is a sequel to The Handmaid's Tale, but The Handmaid's Tale was written, at least partially, as a warning, right? Pretty much like all dystopic novels. And I'm going to do a top 5 overlooked dystopias later in the episode, just so you know, just so you can get excited and like get your pen and paper so you can write some good stuff down, or however it is you take notes. You probably take notes on your phone because we live in the future, but I'm old school and I take notes in my own blood on a piece of wood. So that's me. Anyway, Handmaid's Tale is a warning of what could happen. It is a dreadful picture of a possible future. As I say, it came out in 1984. Now, that was not a halcyon time in America. I believe Reagan was already in office. Is that true? Nixon had just happened. Capitalism was just thriving, as it still is today. The 70s were a time of great social upheaval. I mean, Vietnam was still fresh in people's... There was a lot of, shit going on. However, I will say, I do think, as far as the subjects of The Handmaid's Tale being specifically freedom, more specifically the freedom of women, biological rights, free speech, and that horrible conundrum of who you should really be loyal to, and whether you should be loyal to power, money, or to... it's what you think is good and right. And also the horrible tendency of most people, I would say the vast majority of people, and I'm going to put myself out there, I do not think I am different or special, to follow the flow even when the flow is leading right down the toilet. So, those are some of the themes of The Handmaid's Tale. I have to say, I think those themes are very resonant today. And I think if Margaret Atwood had written another dark, stark, ambiguous novel about those themes, I don't know that that's what our society needs today. Because, you see, The Testaments is not about that. That's not the point of The Testaments. It is a light at the end of the tunnel. It is an explaining. It is an attempt... by Margaret Atwood to lead her readers and fans to an understanding of where Gilead came from and how people played the roles they did in its creation and continuation. I think it's a book that is finely tuned to this moment, and I think she was smart to write it the way she did. I will say, now, on this little leaflet, they don't talk about who the 3 female protagonists are. Now, I am going to spoil that. Not later sort of incarnations of themselves. But, in the first 3 chapters, we meet the first 3 protagonists. So I am going to talk about that. I hope you don't mind, but I really don't think you should, because like I said, it's within the first 20 pages you meet all 3 of them. So, I won't go into what happens to them, but just who they are. So now, first and foremost, on the little synopsis, something about an enforcer of Gilead. I remember reading something like that just mere moments ago. Y'all, this is my favorite part of this fucking book. Aunt Lydia is one of the protagonists. She is one of the narrators, and oh my God. I think if you go back to the Handmaid's Tale episode we did, I think I specifically asked, 1, to learn more about the aunts, because I just think that's fascinating. These women who are you know what they remind me of? And I don't know if this is a myth. I'm not sure if this is a myth or not, but, in the South before the Civil War, when slavery was still a thing, one of the ways that plantation owners controlled the slaves on their plantation was by giving one of the slaves a promotion, allowing that slave to become like an overseer. Now, not every overseer was originally a slave, but many were. Some were. Actually, I don't know. I think that some were. To me, this almost sounds like a myth, but I'm pretty sure I've read about it in actual history books. But of course, that means nothing. I mean, if the Handmaid's Tale has taught us nothing, it's that history books are a falsehood. But anyway, and once a person who had been oppressed was given, more than oppressed, enslaved, was given the ability to exercise power over other people. I'm sure sometimes they were lenient and kind, but often, no, they were not. They were not at all, because they didn't want to go back to the position they'd been in before, so sometimes they were as cruel or more cruel. And I'm sure there are better examples of that than something as charged as slavery in America. Y'all leave a comment somewhere and let me know. Leave it on our Facebook page, or this is kind of a weird thing to leave a comment about, but help me out, because I know there are better examples of this. But anyway, Aunt Lydia is a great literary example of that, and we learn more about where she came from, how she grew up, and how she became this fucking hatchet-faced bitch that she is in The Handmaid's Tale. And can I just tell you, Ann Dowd, who plays Aunt Lydia in the Hulu series, is fucking amazing in that role. She is perfect in that role. And she actually, just so you know, is reading the part of Aunt Lydia in the audiobook of the Testament. So if you like to do audiobooks, I know Morgie, before she got trapped in that submarine under the sea, she loves audiobooks. I would say the fact that Ann Dowd reads Aunt Lydia, one of the 3 main voices in the entire narrative, is a huge plus. Anyway, so you might want to check that out. So Aunt Lydia, by far the most interesting part of the book for me. We also meet Agnes, who's the young woman who grew up in Gilead, and we follow her from there's a little bit in her youth, and then up through marrying age, and then what happens to her after marrying age. And Agnes is interesting. Agnes reminds me of when you read about people who escaped from North Korea or grew up in North Korea in that unique atmosphere. Or, hey, here's one that's closer to home. People that grew up in conservative, very conservative, religious Christian households. And sort of, as you experience more of the world, things that when you were a naive and trusting child seemed like obvious truths become much less obvious. So she's interesting in that way. She does go on a journey. She's more interesting because of what she's going through than who she is as a person. And I will tell you, and this is a possible failing of the Testaments, I don't know if I could really characterize her personality. Maybe that's a failing of me as a reader, but she's kind of bland, kind of milquetoast. I mean, she's courageous in her way, but not a standout character to me. However, I do much prefer Agnes to fucking Daisy. Now, Daisy's the one who grows up in Canada. She grows up in Toronto, and her life is more or less normal. I mean, there's the obvious exception to normality, which is just across the border is Gilead, which is, and the United States doesn't really exist anymore, and that's crazy. But her life is more or less normal. She goes to school. She's a teenager. She's sullen. She got crushes on boys. I mean, shit like that. However, and look, I'm not here to shade Miss Margaret Atwood. I love Margaret Atwood, and I think she's written so many amazing books in her life, and is just an amazing person in general. All that being said, I do think she struggles to write teenagers. Now, Miss Margaret Atwood is 79 years old and looking fab, I might mention. I don't know if y'all saw, but she had a photo shoot in the Sunday Times style section. If y'all haven't seen it, you have got to look it up. Google that shit, Sunday Times style section, or you could just look up Margaret Atwood photo shoot, and I bet that shit will come up. She's got these like witchy ass hair extensions, this huge mound of gray hair, and she's in like designer cape dresses and vintage gloves, long black feathers. There's one picture of her with a lone, very white egg. I mean, it is very Myrtle Snow from American Horror Story. Balenciaga! Love Myrtle Snow. That is essentially my ideal look. That's my aesthetic right there, is Myrtle Snow / Margaret Atwood in the Sunday Times style section. So, she looks great. She is great. She's amazing. She's at, top of her career. But I do think she struggles to believably write a teenager living in more or less the modern era. Daisy comes off as very two-dimensional to me. And she doesn't have to be likable, but I do need to be interested. And honestly, I wasn't. To me, personally, I could not wait to get through her sections of the book so I could get back to motherfucking Aunt Lydia. Love Aunt Lydia. Now, without Aunt Lydia, now we get her memoir. The other two girls, we get testimonies, like witness statements, but we get Aunt Lydia's memoir. And God, without that memoir, I don't think I would have liked this book. However, I think in the little synopsis I read, it says something about braiding stories together, and that is what it does. And it's not just that Aunt Lydia's story is great, Agnes's story is okay, and Daisy's story sucks. No, they're braided together over time, various different ways, and one sort of informs the other, and it's really... I think it's a great book, and I think you should read it, especially if you're a fan of The Handmaid's Tale or of the Hulu series. Because, that's another smart thing she did. So this book is not just a sequel to The Handmaid's Tale, it's also a sequel to the TV series. Because, she sets it 15 or 16 years later after The Handmaid's Tale. So all the stuff in the TV show can still happen, and it will still lead into the Testaments. So they could, conceivably, I suppose, do the Testaments as the final season of The Handmaid's Tale. I don't know if they will, but they certainly could. And some things that happened in the show that don't happen in the book inform the Testaments. Okay? So, I don't know if I want to go too much further into that for fear of spoilers, but just so you know, she wove it together brilliantly. And I think that is so fucking smart. She deserves kudos for that. Let's see. Is there anything here I haven't covered? See, normally Morgan talks while I look over my notes. Okay, so I was reading through Goodreads reviews of this book, and generally people agree with me about Daisy. I don't think that's a hot take. I think that's a take many people are going to agree with, but one reviewer, who I'm sorry, I didn't write down her name, but she wrote, "In fact, Daisy is a bratty teen on the run who nevertheless makes time for romance." Which is, admittedly, a tired trope in literature, right? But you know what? I don't mind tropes. I don't mind generalizations. I don't even mind stereotypes to a certain extent. I think they're all kind of fun, and you can play with them. And if she had done something more revolutionary with this trope of this bratty teen who has crushes on boys and whatever, I don't think anyone would complain. I do think she could have pushed that character further and gotten Daisy more out of her comfort zone, which once you read the book, I'd be interested to hear what you think. Anyway, Really hard not to give spoilers, but I think I've done a really fantastic job. By the way, you may or may not have heard, but the Testaments just won the Booker Prize, the 2019 Booker Prize. Now, if you don't know what the Man Booker Prize is, well, it's just called the Booker Prize now, but it used to be called the Man Booker Prize. And it had some other name, like in the early 20th century, but it's essentially, it's given out, it's an English award, and it's given out to a work of fiction that is published in England, written in English. So anyone in the world can be nominated, be on the long list, and then later on the short list. The Testaments, pardon me, the Testaments was actually shortlisted even before it was published, and this is actually, I think I wrote it down here. This was actually Margaret Atwood's sixth nomination for a Booker Prize. And actually, this was her second win because she also won the Booker Prize for The Blind Assassin in 2000. Now, I'm going to be straight up with you. I've read some Margaret Atwood, but she's very prolific, and I have not read The Blind Assassin. So please do not judge me for that. If you've read it, I'd love to hear what you think. But anyway, she won the Booker Prize this year. However, and here's the rub, y'all. She actually was one of two winners. Now, the Booker Prize has split its prize twice before. In 1974, they split it between Nadine Gordimer and Stanley Middleton. Now, I've heard of Nadine Gordimer, but I have never heard of Stanley Middleton, but I'm sure they're very, very talented. And then in 1992, they split the Booker Prize between Michael Ondaatje, perhaps, and Barry Unsworth. Again, people I've never heard of, which, by the way, that's kind of scary, isn't it? I mean, look, I'm not pretending to be either the smartest or the most well-read person of all time, but I'm not stupid, and I do read books, and I don't know most of these people. And these are famous people. I mean, it's less upsetting for me as like, oh, I don't know something, because the world is wide and full of knowledge. It's more upsetting to me in the idea of like, I could work so hard my entire life, write so many good books, win the Booker Prize, etc., and there would still be some faggot in Arkansas a couple years later who doesn't even know I exist. You know, it's like immortality is very rare. And even the people we think are immortal, like, well, my mind goes to Tolkien, J.R.R. Tolkien, but Shakespeare. Girl, in 2,000 years, they may or may not know who Shakespeare is. I mean, right? Like, when the Library of Alexandria burned, we lost so many classical works. And, you know, we think of, sorry for me being a classics nerd, but we think of maybe, you know, Aeschylus or Euripides as these sort of paragons, these great people in ancient Greece, these dramatists who were famous in their time and have been more or less famous ever since, though I'm sure lots of listeners don't know them, and I don't judge you for that, but there may have been tons of other dramatists. In fact, we know there were tons of other dramatists, Greek and Roman, whose works were lost when the Library of Alexandria burned. And that's a horrifying thought. I mean, we've got these, what is it? I can't remember now. Let's say 15 extant plays from ancient Greece. Girl! That's a tiny, tiny fraction of the plays that were put on, you know? And maybe they were the best. I mean, who decides that, though? I mean, the reason most of the plays we have now, we even have, is because Christian monks copied them. And other religious orders, scribes and people, copied them down. So obviously they were popular in their time, but that's not to say that there's not a play that existed by, you know, Acropolis or something, a name I just made up, whose work would be so incredibly touching and important to us today, but they didn't think it was important back then, and so it wasn't kept, you know? Anyway, I'm just saying, I don't know these people who won the Booker Prize. Back to this year. So, Margaret Atwood won the Booker along with Bernardine Evaristo. I believe that's her name. Forgive me. Bernardine Evaristo wrote a book called Girl, Woman, Other, which actually sounds really good. I was reading a synopsis of it. I won't try to give it to you now, but if you're interested, you know, she's the very first black woman to win the Booker Prize, so that's a big deal. And her book is all about femalehood and identity and taking and losing power, I think I read. It sounds really fascinating. And she also is super, like, quite a magical person. I was watching interviews with her. But see, I don't know her. Maybe I will know her now that the Booker Prize exists, but whatever. So after 1992, when old Michael and old Barry won, the rules were changed to insist that the prize not be divided or withheld. Now, I don't know why they did that. I suppose because, it's like in All Stars 4 of RuPaul's Drag Race. All Stars 4 or 5? Well, I'm talking about the All Stars where Monique Monet Exchange and Trinity the Tuck Taylor both won the All Stars crown. Now, they both got their money, they both got a crown, but does the fact that two people won the prize cheapen it? I'm of the camp that says yes. I actually do think yes. However, I am nowhere near as passionate about this this topic as some people are. Now, I was reading through about this split judgment, and I came across this article in the Financial Times. Now, normally I don't do this because I get awkward ringing from Morgan, but I can just pretend I'm ringing aloud to myself here. So, I'm going to read you some of this article. Now, this is by a woman named Erica Wagner, or Wagner, Wagner. Let's say Wagner and be fancy. Erica Wagner. Now, she's an author, and she's actually judged the Booker Prize a couple of times, as well as a bunch of other literary awards. But she wrote this, I think, scathing overreaction. But here, let's see what you think. Why not? In the grand scheme of things, why shouldn't the Booker Prize judges give their gong to two winners instead of one? Sure, the rules explicitly state that the prize may not be divided or withheld, but honestly, why keep talking about rules when there are instincts and feelings at play? Welcome to 2019, when the politics of instinct, the politics of feeling, have come to infect not only our most established democracies, but the hitherto well-mannered and imperturbable. I think that's spelled wrong. But the hitherto well-mannered and imperturbable. I'm perturbed. Imperturbable world of literary awards as well. A reminder, the job of the Booker judges is to give the Booker Prize to a single author. That is, finally, the judge's only job. If you wonder how I know this, I will reveal that I have been a Booker judge. Twice! Okay, see, now, at first I was amused, then I was like, okay, ma'am, please sit down. Choosing one novel out of 6 magnificent candidates is really difficult. It is also, while we're at it, nonsensical, since no novelist hopes that his or her book will be compared with another in this way. Readers, after all, don't think like that. Now I'm going to pause this right here. Readers do think like that. Does Miss Erica Wagner not know about the atrocious Whitney Houston versus Mariah Carey debates? Does she not know about the Harry Potter versus magicians debates? Does she not know about Lord of the Rings versus Chronicles of Narnia? Yes, readers do this, you silly fool. Half of the internet is top 5 lists, which is just ranking things. I think so. She said a few things now that I'm like, girl, I don't know if I agree with you. I mean, obviously she's probably a better source for things like this, but not in my own little head. And yet, when you sign up to be a Booker judge, this is what you agree to do, because those are the rules. Okay, so already I'm getting feelings that she's like small c conservative, as in not politically conservative. I know she's not, because later in the article she talks about Trump being an asshole and people not responding to subpoenas, and she also talks about Boris Johnson, his suspension of Parliament. So I know she's politically liberal, but she's small c conservative in this trenchant obsession with rules. Fuck your rules. That's what I say. Fuck your rules. Anyway, on Monday, however, the Booker Booker judges were, it seems, unable to follow the rules. Peter Florence, director of the Hay Festival, who the fuck knows what the Hay Festival is? Somebody! And this year's chair said the judges had tried voting to find a winner, but that didn't work. Come again? There were 5 judges, so I'm guessing it was a 3-2 split. There's no electoral college to deal with here. It's not complicated. Whoever gets the most votes wins, unless, apparently, they don't. Which is how we all ended up with the wholly unsatisfactory result of both Margaret Atwood and Bernardine Evaristo winning the prize. I'm not going to get into an argument about which novel deserved to win. That's not the point. A choice needed to be made, and what they made instead was fudge. Now, I like that, and I am stealing that from her. What you made was fudge. That's funny to me. But you know what? I kind of agree with her on this. What we've ended up with is a wholly unsatisfactory result. Not because, look, to be honest with y'all, I don't give 2 shits about the Booker Prize. I don't give 2 shits about any prizes, really, because nobody can judge me but Jesus. I mean, like I was talking about with Monet Exchange versus Trinity the Tuck Taylor, sometimes it is unsatisfactory. You're looking for one winner, and a tie, doesn't that mean, okay, I see her point. Okay, so then she goes off on a political tangent, which I agree with, but is not really what this podcast is about, and then she finishes up. In that final Booker meeting, we hear Gabby Wood, the prize's literary director, inform the judges that the prize could not be divided. Still, the judges insisted they would divide the prize. We took it as a starting point for further discussion, Mr. Florence said. Helena Kennedy, chair of the trustees, was called to deliver the same news. It was the collective will of the jury to say, "We cannot abide by these rules," said Mr. Florence. That sentence strikes a chill into my heart. Really, Queen? Okay, well, we'll return to that. Who else in our society will be allowed to say it is our collective will that we cannot abide by these rules? It is true, of course, that there are rules that must be challenged and sometimes broken. But the rule that there should be a single winner of the Booker Prize is surely not one of them. And I can't help wondering whether the judges would have been quite so cavalier about their decision in a different political climate. I know it's only a literary prize. I know that we have 2 winners to celebrate now, and not 1. And yet, the divided Booker seems a symptom of something darker, too. So, okay, Miss Wagner. This rule that the prize cannot be divided is from 1992. So that's what? Almost 30 years ago. Close to 28. 26 years ago, I think. My math... No, that's right. 26 years ago. More or less. That's not an old rule, honey. That's not even old enough to be in the New Testament. You know what I mean? That's not constitutional. That's a prize they made in 1992. And also, by the way, in 1992, we were in a very different political climate, and they split the prize. And in 1974, now that wasn't a great time in America, but this is an English prize. I don't know. Was that Margaret Thatcher in 1974? Oh, I'm embarrassed. I'm not certain. I really don't know. But I just don't understand this whole thing where it's like, oh, they're splitting the prize. They're breaking the literary award rule. Oh, it's because of the climate. No, Queen. I think this is because of you. And also, that sentence strikes a chill into my heart. Really, Queen? It was the collective will of the jury to say we cannot abide by those rules. And that sentence strikes a chill into your heart? What kind of blasé, boring, tax-paying, healthy mother of 3 are you? Really? Wake up. Who do you think makes rules? The same people who break rules. People are people. What is this sudden, why is this rule so important to you? Why is any rule so important to you? Good God, live free. Jesus. So, I thought this was funny. Now, like I said, she's politically liberal, and so I like that about her. And I also looked up her picture. I mean, I didn't look it up, but it came up with the article. And she looks cool. I'm very disappointed in her. I don't know what the fuck she's on about, but I think she's overreacting. But who am I to judge someone else for overreacting? So that is our bi-monthly That's Problematic segment, which I think I forgot to say, but that's problematic. Okay, so just to finish up very quickly here. Oh my gosh, time flies even when I'm talking by myself. Okay. So I have pulled together a very short, down and dirty top 5 overlooked dystopic works. Now, a dystopia is Greek for bad place, and it just means a work that focuses on a future that is wholly or mostly unpleasant. There are lots of kinds of dystopias, environmental dystopias, political dystopias, social dystopias. Most of the best dystopias actually blend those different elements together. So now, these are overlooked dystopias, so right off the bat, I'm not going to be talking about Brave New World, 1984, or The Handmaid's Tale, because those have been looked at. Now, these 5 works, you might well know them, girl. I'm not saying you don't. Y'all are well read. But I think that these 5 works deserve more attention. So number 5, a 2003 novel by our very own Margaret Atwood, Oryx and Crake, is, well, it's speculative fiction. It's certainly a dystopia. It's also kind of a romance, but it's also kind of a science fiction. It's a really interesting work that blends genres. And it's essentially about a post-apocalyptic character called the Snowman, or Snowman, not the Snowman. And he lives near a group of primitive human-like creatures he calls Crakers. And then we flash back to Snowman's past. And he was a boy named Jimmy who grew up in a world dominated by multinational corporations and privileged compounds for the families of the corporation's employees. And, certain things happen. Jimmy moves into one of those fancy compounds. He befriends some scientists. He spends his time looking at child pornography, live executions, and graphic surgery online, which, girl, correct. I mean, well, mostly correct. And then, after graduating from high school, Craig attends the highly respected Watson Crick Institute. And anyway, the whole point is, he falls in love with this girl named Oryx, and it turns out his friend is maybe not so good. It's this world that is dystopic because of capitalism, and is dystopic because of prescriptions, medications, greed, messing with the human genome. It's a really good book. And, most of Margaret Atwood stuff gets love, but I hardly ever hear about Oryx and Crake. So, I think you should check that out. Okay, number 4 is actually a book I've talked about before. It is by Jeff Vandermeer, and it's called Born. Now, this is the newest Jeff Vandermeer novel. It just came out in 2017. Essentially, it's a post-apocalyptic world that's overrun by biotechnology. So, it takes place in the ruins of a nameless city in the future, ruled by a giant grizzly bear called Mord. And we follow a woman named Rachel who lives as a scavenger, collecting genetically engineered organisms and experiments created by the biotech firm The Company. So it's so weird, so upsetting, so touching, and kind of like Jeff Vandermeer's other, like Annihilation, which was made into a movie. That's part of a 3-part series. It's frightening and it's gross, but it's also gorgeous. And to be honest with you, it's hard to find dystopic works that are also gorgeous, and Born is one of them. So check Born out. I really recommend that, and I don't think people talk about that enough, especially because Annihilation and its sequels have really been getting a lot of the attention recently. Okay, next up actually is a film. It's a 2000 Japanese dystopian thriller directed by Kenji Fukasaku, and written by Kenta Fukasaku. Oh, I don't know if that's brothers, sisters, lovers, I have no idea. Based on the 1999 novel by Koshun Takami. And it is essentially, it's the Hunger Games, except it's set in Japan. It's not really the Hunger Games, but I have heard rumors and whispers that the Hunger Games not so subtly took its inspiration from Battle Royale. So, essentially, the plot of Battle Royale is that following a major recession, the Japanese government passes an act to control Japan's unruly youth. You know, they used to do that with wars, but you know, now we've got to figure out other ways. So this class is taken on a field trip, but then they are gassed and taken to a remote island. And they are explained to them that they have been chosen to participate in the annual Battle Royale as a result of this act that was passed. They have 3 days to fight to the death until a victor emerges. Explosive collars will kill uncooperative students or those within danger zones, quote unquote, which change daily. So each student is provided with rations, water, a map, and a random weapon. So anyway, it is, so it's kind of like Hunger Games without the revolution after, and it's a fascinating movie. It is extremely violent. You know, if you enjoy Lord of the Flies, if you like the Hunger Games, I really think you should check out Battle Royale. It says a lot about how we control youth, how we build a society almost instantaneously, and it also gives you some of that, that joy that people get from reality TV, like Big Brother or Survivor. Except, you know, these people's lives are really in line. But it's about who do you trust, what alliances do you make, and what's the point anyway if only one student can walk out, right? It's really good. Plus, I mean, if you like Japan, I mean, all these hot young Japanese people slicing each other with katanas, I mean, it's just a good time, you know? Okay, so number 2 is a movie you've probably heard about, but I'm going to guess no more than 15% of our audience have watched this movie. And you know what? I haven't watched it all the way through. I think I've seen most of it in clips, but it is one of the I would say it's probably the very first dystopia in film. It's 1927's Metropolis, which is a German expressionist science fiction drama film. Okay, that was a little wordy there, Wikipedia, but we'll go with it. Directed by Fritz Lang, it's essentially all about a horrible future in which there are 2 very distinct classes. Those who live above and live this, it's a silent film, and it's black and white, but it's gorgeous, though, in spite of that. Those who live above in these gorgeous buildings and live lives of luxury and indulgence, and those who live below and are essentially just, nameless, lifeless workers. And it's about a man who tries to go from one to the other. It's gorgeous. It's very Art Deco. It's super stylized. And honestly, I wish I could be like, oh, I love old movies, black and white. I hate black and white movies. I'm looking for color. I mean, I love The Wizard of Oz, but only once it becomes colorful, you know. But this movie is really, really fascinating. And also, I think quite a damning take on society, class, and capitalism. And really, I mean, there's a reason that people are still talking about it today, almost 100 years after it was made. Okay, so Metropolis is my number 2. Now, my number 1, I'm proud of this one. Now, I'll be straight up with you. I haven't seen this work. I came upon it in the research, and I think it sounds so fucking good. First, this was a science fiction dystopian short story by American writer Kurt Vonnegut. I'm sure you've heard of him. It's called Harrison Bergeron. Have y'all read this short story? Okay, it was also, oh my god, I'm just like, ugh, I cannot wait to watch this. It was made into a TV movie starring, oh, what's his face? Fucking Samwise Gamgee, girl. Oh, wait, I'm gonna look, I can't remember his name. Samwise Gamgee. Sean Austin. Okay. I can't believe I even had to look that up, but I'm so bad with proper nouns. I can't remember a goddamn thing. Anyway, so it stars Sean Austin, and he's young, but definitely older than the Goonies. And okay, so it's essentially about in the year 2081. The 211th, 212th, and 213th Amendments to the Constitution dictate that all Americans are fully equal and are not allowed to be smarter, better looking, or more physically able than anyone else. The handicapper general's agents enforce the equality laws, forcing citizens to wear quote unquote handicaps, masks for those who are too beautiful, loud radios that disrupt the thoughts inside the ears of intelligent people, and heavy weights for the strong or athletic. One April, 14-year-old Harrison Bergeron, an intelligent, athletic, and good-looking teenager, I think he's like 7 feet tall in the short story, probably not in the movie because Sean Astin's not that tall, is taken away from his parents, George and Hazel Bergeron, by the government. They are barely aware of the tragedy as Hazel has average, quote-unquote, intelligence, which is a euphemism for stupidity, and George has a handicap radio installed by the government to regulate his above-average intelligence. Okay, so it's about Harrison Bergeron being kind of an ubermensch and fighting against this handicapper society. I think it sounds so fucking good. And I looked up some quotes on, or not some quotes, some clips on YouTube, and girl, I think it looks so good. I'm going to find it. Y'all need to check it out. Harrison Bergeron, Bergeron, written by Kurt Vonnegut. You know, and the story, evidently I'm not the only one who thinks it sounds great because it received the 2019 Hall of Fame Award from the Libertarian Futurist Society. Wait, what is that? Is that some conservative shit? It looks like a lot of dystopias and The Handmaid's Tale won it in 1987. Okay, so I don't know what this award is. It's called the Prometheus Award. But anyway, okay, so other people are taking note of this fucking amazing short story as well. So check that out. I don't know if you can find the full movie on YouTube, but I bet you can find at least parts of it. All right, friends, and I think I have successfully, I've successfully filled up this hour just about. I have 2 quick plugs for you. The first is a book that I think I've actually plugged before, but it dovetails so neatly into the Testaments. It is called Tropic of Kansas, and it's a novel by Christopher Brown. It is about, it's a dystopian novel, so right in line with what we've been talking about. It's essentially about a time in which the United States of America is no more, but has been broken into warring territories, the center of which has become known as the Tropic of Kansas. Though this gaping geographic hole has no clear boundaries, everyone knows it's out there, that once bountiful part of the heartland broken by greed and exploitation, where neglect now breeds unrest. I don't like the way this synopsis is written. It's a little too highfalutin for me. 2 travelers appear in this arid American wilderness. Sig, the fugitive orphan of political dissidents, and his foster sister, Tanya, a government investigator whose search for Sig leads her into her own past and toward an unexpected future. Okay, that's a good synopsis, but let me tell y'all. What this book was to me, to my little mind, is what a Trump dictatorship would become. That's the way I read it, and let me tell you, it just came out in 2017. Yes, July 11th, 2017. So I probably am not that far off. Also, not for nothing, I met Christopher Brown at a literary festival. I mean, just in passing. And he doesn't look that cute in his author's photo, but let me tell you, I was quite taken with him in real life. I thought he was very cute. Anyway, so this is a newer dystopic novel. I mean, I could have put it in the Overlooked novels, but those are mostly older works. And this one's very recent. Tropic of Kansas, What Would Happen If Trump Won? And it's kind of like Trump wins a dictatorship, that is. So he never steps down. And kind of like it's Mad Maxy a little bit, so a little bit of that kind of dystopia. It's really good. I do recommend it. And my other recommendation this week is... this one's a little bit more scholarly. I'm not going to lie to you, it's not the easiest thing to read in the entire world, but it's called The Art of Cruelty, A Reckoning by Maggie Nelson. Now, I bought this book years ago because it's at least partially about Antonin Artaud, who's someone I've been obsessed with since college, and he was a theater artist and a writer who was of the opinion that the best kind of art is an art that tears people down, sort of breaks them with spectacle and violence, so that then they can be built back up as better people. Now, this book, The Art of Cruelty, is about Artaud, but it's really more about, generally about representations of cruelty and violence in art. So very appropriate for a Handmaid's Tale / The Testaments talk. It goes from like Sylvia Plath's poetry to Francis Bacon's paintings. I don't know if y'all are familiar with Francis Bacon, the painter, but that man was fucked up. He was very gay, which I like about him, but he was also, he was a unique character. I'll just put it that way. From the Saw franchise to Yoko Ono's performance art, Nelson's nuanced exploration across the artistic landscape ultimately offers a model of how one might balance strong ethical convictions with an equally strong appreciation for work that tests the limits of taste, taboo, and permissibility. Y'all, this is a really good book. So I told you I read it or bought it years ago. I couldn't get into it at first, but I read it and then immediately turned back to page 1 and began rereading it. And I'm about halfway through my reread now. I've learned so much about genre-bending artists and envelope-pushing performers, and it's just really, really good. I strongly recommend it. It's a really good piece of art criticism, and I'm fucking in love with Miss Maggie Nelson. So, okay. So, 2 plugs for you, Tropic of Kansas and The Art of Cruelty, both connected to The Handmaid's Tale. You should also, if you're interested, check out Oryx and Crake by Margaret Atwood, Born by Jeff Vandermeer, Battle Royale, the movie, Metropolis, the movie, and Harrison Bergeron, which is a short story written by Kurt Vonnegut, but was also made into a TV movie starring Samwise Gamgee, everyone's favorite Hobbit. Alright, so we've reached that fantastic part of the podcast where I tell you about all the ways that you should follow us online, and oh my god, I don't have Morgan here to act as my crutch. Let's see. If you would like to hear more from us, we have a Facebook page, Beauty and the Bitch, or Beauty and the Bee. We also have a blog on WordPress, bnbcast.wordpress.com, or you can just search Beauty and the Bitch WordPress. We've got every single episode of our podcast on there because we've got a feed along the left side of the blog. Let's see where else. We have almost every single episode on our YouTube channel. Just search Beauty and the Bitch on YouTube. Now, it's just a static picture of our header and then audio, but if you need an easy place to listen to the podcast, YouTube is accessible to almost everyone. Of course, you can find us on all the podcast apps, Stitcher and the iTunes podcast app, or whatever it's called these days, and etc., etc. You can follow me at Parker_Homestead. You know, when I'm not talking about dystopias these days, I'm trying to create a utopia out in the forest. But, you know, a lot of people say there's no such thing as a utopia, and every utopia is actually a dystopia. And I guess I'll find out myself while I'm trying to grow some squash. If you would like to follow Morgan, she is at Morganized Mess on Instagram. She is going through a journey these days. If you go to her Instagram, you might be able to figure out why she's actually not on the episode today. Hint, it's neither because she's in jail, though her wigs deserve it, nor because she's at the bottom of the sea. Oh my gosh, was that everything? We're on Twitter, but we never update it. Wow, y'all. I think that's it. So, thank you for subscribing. Thank you for rating. Listen, every 5-star rating we get really pops us up in the iTunes, whatever, spreadsheet or however the fuck they keep track of it. And the more people that give us 5-star reviews, the more likely we are to be recommended to new listeners. And, oh my God, I almost forgot. So, our Patreon
Now, we kind of psyched y'all out. Our Patreon does not yet have an episode on it, but in just a very few days, let's see, next Monday, we'll be uploading our very first Patreon episode. Now, y'all, I am very excited about this. Because of technical difficulties, we had to push it back, but it is a really good episode. We are talking about Neon Genesis Evangelion, which is a masterpiece anime. Now, look, I've been known to judge anime lovers a time or two in my life. Don't get offended. Don't get offended. You know, with every good thing comes a bad thing. And with the anime community, I see the bad thing as much as the good thing. That's all I'm going to say about that. However, I make an exception for the fucking masterpiece that is Evangelion. Morgan and I are watching through the entire original series, as well as possibly some of the movies after. The first episode is us talking about the first 5 episodes of the series. Now, we do talk about spoilers, but, you know, Evangelion is on Netflix these days, so the episodes are short. Sit down this week or, you know, whenever you have time, watch the first handful of episodes, and then listen to our Patreon episode, and we'll explain to you why everything means everything and why Shinji is a little perfect angel who deserves nothing that he's going through. Of course, you do have to subscribe to our Patreon to get that content. For just a $2 a month subscription, you get an extra episode, very long episode, a month, I should say. And you also get a shout out on the podcast. So if you want to be famous, you want all your friends to be jealous of you, all you have to do is give us a little donation. Okay, that's legit it, and it's good because this hour of talking, girl, my throat is sore, and I am finished. I hope y'all have a good week and a good life, and don't fall into any dystopias. Bye!
Do you have a home? Beauty in the Bitch.
You
look
bitch.
Bitch, Beauty in the Bitch.
Beauty in the bitch.
Bitch, bitch.